What the heck's going on? How are you supposed to grow your startup without a plan and with little insight of what's going to hit your young company next? The Scaleup Canvas is designed to help you recognize the issues that you face as you scale or the challenges that will soon be coming your way if you're starting up. It allows you early insight into the nature of growth and scaling so that you can make smart choices for yourself and your team. The Scaleup Canvas is based on many years of experience of growing and building startups, both as a founder as well as coaching many high-growth companies. I'm Neil Lewis, a Got the T-shirt Scale-Up coach, and we at MediaModo are empowering entrepreneurs. Traditional methods of measuring scale-ups are numerical, based on revenue or staff or subscriber growth. These classic government policy type measurements keep economists and policymakers employed, but don't help founders understand how to plan for growth. The Scaleup Canvas offers a new way to see the shift between startup to scale-up to corporate, which is principally about maturity, that allows you to see the growth challenges before they hit you. Instead of using numbers, the Scaleup Canvas looks at changing maturity across a range of factors, which can largely be classified under the headings of product, team, customer, and culture. Note two critical insights in this model. Firstly, maturity can move at different speeds in different areas. Think of a young boy whose voice is breaking. His voice can be both adult and childlike at the same time. Secondly, maturity is reversible. A startup which pivots classically reverts back to a startup product experimentation because the product to market fit has failed to deliver sufficient results. Equally, a corporate which radically reinvents itself, think of Steve Jobs' return to Apple and his Crazy One speech, pushes its maturity back from corporate to scale up in the realms of product, team, customer, and culture. These maturity insights enable us to build a framework to help founders successfully scale their businesses as captured on the Scaleup Canvas. To think about how we can apply the Scaleup Canvas to individual businesses, let's start by comparing what happens at each stage of maturity. What is a startup's main focus? A startup is focused on demonstrating product to market fit. This happens through a series of increasingly complex product or service iterations, from basic proof of concept to functional minimum viable product. The aim is to match real resolution of customer pain or worry with powerful user engagement and a strong sense of purpose, all of which, when aligned, lead to rapid sales or user growth, often measured by word-of-mouth recommendations. Once we reach scale-up maturity with the product, then the product to market fit is largely established. Now the company moves into a new phase of growth where it is challenged by a myriad of complexity that risks crushing the founder's time and turning their growth strategy to a reactive, keep the ship afloat mentality. The Scaleup Canvas is designed to provide founders in the startup and scale-up phases with a tool to simplify and better prioritize how they tackle the new challenges. We will also consider what corporates do, not so much because founders are seeking to build corporate-style businesses, but rather because it acts as a warning of how your organization will develop unless you deliberately set out not to allow corporatization. In the corporate phase of maturity, everything is focused on the removal of error and predictability, the squeeze down on error. The insight here is that the desire for predictability removes any ability to experiment and equally innovate in radical or new directions. Hence, corporates cannot be startups, but if they want startup innovation, they're best advised to buy them rather than attempt to copy them. Let's now look at how innovation varies between the startup to scale-up to corporate stages, beginning with startup innovation. Startups are focused on product or service experimentation. At this stage, any decent hypothesis is worth testing, and data is the only evidence which counts. As a startup matures, so its product or service experimentation moves to a product improvement process where the core product is established but missing functionality such as languages, operating system compatibility, apps and payment methods, and so on and so forth. Scale-up innovation takes place where the product innovation has shifted from raw experimentation to a series of structured improvements. The Scaleup now begins to innovate in new areas, broadly teams, culture and customer, but more specifically founder roles, brand, rewards, sales leadership, hiring, internationalization, customer development, decision cultures, how execution is delivered, and who is answerable to whom. When a scale-up matures to a corporate, then product, team, culture and customer challenges are now improved incrementally rather than wholesale or radically. The focus of innovation shifts. At the stage of corporate innovation, new ideas are nearly all about increasing distribution. This may come about by adding additional countries where your product can be sold, signing distribution agreements with other large organizations, or buying companies who have a distribution network that you want to acquire, or new products that you can sell to your existing customers. There may come a point in a mature corporate where all aspects of the business are focused on incremental improvements and no further significant innovation is taking place. Let's now have a look at how changing founder roles impact on young companies as they begin to scale. In the startup phase, the founder roles are challenged by differing commitments among the founders. Classically, when you think of a breakfast plate, the chicken is interested, they invest in an egg, but the pig is committed. That bacon is their backside. Resolving commitment issues is often key to a successful founded team. As the startup scales, so the roles change. It is now possible to pay founders and their roles need to be defined more clearly. Hence, who is responsible for setting and creating the company culture? Who decides how much people get paid and who receives equity or options? And who is responsible for sales or product execution? In the corporate stage, the founders have typically sold out and become spokespersons or advisors only, which explains why founders leave their sole businesses so quickly and so often. It is wise to recognize this corporate stage, as it may or may not be part of what the founder team really wants to create. Big companies such as Tesla have avoided becoming corporatized. Let's now look at how your brand changes as your startup matures. In the startup phase, the brand is almost entirely a function of the personal reputations of the founder team mixed with the strength and clarity of purpose they bring to this project. As the business matures to the scale-up phase, the personal and purpose brands are joined by product brands, recruitment and culture brands. Hiring a team fast but without corporate security or salaries requires a strong pull effect of a cool brand. Lastly, corporates are often defined by a painful search for purpose and mission, but they pay well enough to keep their staff regardless. Let's now look at how teams vary across the startup to scale-up to corporate landscape. Firstly, we'll look at startup teams. The rewards for being a founder on the startup team are share certificates and a life lived on bread and water. It is important to remember this sacrifice when negotiating with new staff or investors at a later stage. In a startup team, the culture is one of equality and yet a dependence on data. If the data says do it, you do, and follow the consequences to the natural conclusion. Hiring for a startup team is largely about who you know. It's hiring mates and close friends and trusted people. It has to be. The risk is so great you have to believe in each other. International sales, if your startup has any, are a happy accident. And sales are made and administered by the founder team or your automated channels. In comparison, scale-ups are dealing with very different team issues. Rewards in a scale-up take a different form as salaries are now possible. Share options take on a different role and a new responsibility. Taking care of the wider team becomes an issue for the founders. The culture of a scale-up is created at this stage. No longer are you hiring mates, people you already know, but now you are deciding how to build diversity in terms of skill, experience, language, culture, gender, age, etc. And within your organization, no longer can all voices be equal, but nevertheless, how do you ensure that all voices are heard? Hiring at scale-up stage is high speed and often urgent. Therefore, how are you attracting and retaining the right people, and what is the process for onboarding and then integrating your new talent? Now do all this in 2 languages at least as your scale-up internationalizes. Lastly, your scale-up sales process and pipeline moves from simple one-to-one or direct sales to complex sales. Now you are selling to multiple decision makers, and increasingly the founders are working with either a newly hired sales director or a sales team or an outsourced sales function or a combination of all three. Finally, let's consider corporate teams as a way to contrast with startup and scale-up team challenges. Rewards for corporate employment is simplified again. It's about the money. Culture-wise, corporate businesses are largely top-down, hierarchical and rigid. Knowing this helps you recruit smart people who prefer your freer scale-up culture. And recruitment in a corporate is concentrated in a specialist department and has become formulaic. The international structure of a corporate business is based on global regions such as EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa, with regional head offices as well as a global HQ. The sales responsibility has been concentrated under a series of senior sales directors who in some cases will also be divisional managing directors. Now let's look at how your company relates to customers as you mature. At the startup stage, founders know nearly all their customers because they either sold to them or administered the sale. Typically, these are either individual customers or, if other businesses, they will be small startups where you speak directly to fellow founders. As your startup matures to scale up, so you can begin selling to larger customers, either private individuals through a third party, so a high street shop, or an enterprise business or government organizations. This sales structure requires pipeline management as a number of people need to be sold to and the purchase decision takes a number of steps. The corporate sales structure is primarily more grown up, more suited and booted. Now let's look at the changing decision culture. In a startup, experimentation is king and data rules. In a scale-up, boundaries are established to limit the degree of experimentation and rules and processes are established. However, sensible experimentation is still encouraged. In the corporate phase, the prime decision mechanism is one of compliance. Did you or didn't you? Again, knowing this is helpful when recruiting smart people with a couple of years of corporate experience for your scale-up. Now let's look at execution. Startups rent everything and use open source and free applications in all cases except a few business-critical areas which are built from scratch. Scale-up execution takes place at a fierce and accelerating pace where the burn of cash is measured against the churn of customers and users and revenue. Once we get to corporate maturity, the overriding objective of a product launch or any execution is to avoid or squeeze down on error. The brand damage risk of a mistake is just too dangerous. Let's look at who the founders answer to as the business matures. In the startup phase, founders answer to each other, to angel and seed investors if you have any, and always to family and friends who suffer alongside you. At scale-up, typically there are venture capitalists too, who will bring their own reporting demands and needs. Some of these demands will and some will not be acceptable to you and your founder team. Equally, the original angels will still be there in the background, and of course family and friends too. At the corporate stage, shareholders want quarterly reports and investment meetings. Not all founders remain in the business at this stage. So, to summarize what we have learned about scaling and the Scaleup Canvas, it is wise from the strategic and business development perspective to view startup to scale up to corporate as a series of maturing steps, which can be either reversed or prevented. Some large companies, particularly those in Silicon Valley, still behave like scale-ups even though they are huge in size and turnover. Scaling up well is good management of the huge complexity of the new challenges, which break down into 4 key areas: product, team, culture, and customer. Each of these areas can mature at different rates too. And to help capture the key issues and to work through those with your founder team, download or pick up a copy of the Scaleup Canvas. If you found this video useful, please like it and share it. I'm Neil Lewis, a Got the T-shirt Scale Up coach, and we are Media Modo, empowering entrepreneurs. Thanks for listening.